In 612 BC, the greatest empire the ancient world had ever known vanished forever in flames, and almost no one alive today even remembers why. This was Assyria, a superpower so feared that entire nations across the ancient Near East paid tribute just to avoid its terrifying armies. For nearly 3 centuries, Assyrian kings ruled from the shores of the Mediterranean to the towering mountains of ancient Western Persia. Their great cities held vast libraries, golden palaces and war machines that were centuries ahead of anything the ancient world had ever seen. Yet within a single generation, this seemingly unstoppable empire collapsed completely into ash, and its magnificent capital simply disappeared. Assyria began as a small, vulnerable kingdom along the winding Tigris River, surrounded on every side by rivals hungry for its fertile land. Its earliest kings understood one brutal truth about survival in that world. You conquered first, or you were very quickly conquered instead. Slowly, through many long decades of relentless military campaigns, Assyrian armies pushed steadily outward across Mesopotamia and far beyond. Each new victory brought more gold, more captured slaves, and more terrified kingdoms, desperately begging for peace instead of endless war. By the 9th century BC, Assyria was no longer just a small kingdom. It was rapidly becoming a sprawling empire without any clear borders left. And with every newly conquered territory came a darker, more pressing question for its rulers. How do you hold an empire this enormous together? The answer, chosen quite deliberately, was terror, organized, efficient, and very publicly displayed for every neighboring nation to witness. Assyrian soldiers carried advanced iron weapons long before most of their enemies had even learned to properly master that deadly new metal. Massive siege engines rolled slowly toward enemy city walls, battering them apart while skilled archers rained arrows down from behind them. Rebellious cities were deliberately made into brutal examples, their leaders flayed alive, their people dragged away in heavy iron chains. Fear itself became a weapon far more powerful than any sword, spreading rapidly across the region faster than the armies themselves could march. Within just a few decades, kings across the entire ancient Near East learned that resisting Assyria almost always meant total annihilation. At the very heart of this vast empire stood Nineveh, a city so massive and grand it seemed built for gods rather than for mere mortal men. Its enormous stone walls stretched for many miles around the city, wide enough for chariots to race side by side along the very top of them. Inside those great walls, King Ashurbanipal built a vast library holding thousands of clay tablets filled with centuries of ancient knowledge. Lush hanging gardens climbed in wide terraces above the crowded streets, watered by canals cleverly engineered centuries ahead of their time. Merchants from many distant lands filled the bustling markets daily, trading silver, exotic spices, and stories from faraway foreign shores. To stand within Nineveh's mighty walls was to stand at the very center of civilization itself, or so its proud and confident people believed. But beneath that golden, glittering surface, the empire had grown dangerously dependent on the relentless promise of constant, endless conquest. Endless, expensive wars slowly drained the royal treasury dry, and endless demands for tribute bred deep resentment in every conquered province. When the great King Ashurbanipal finally died, his own sons turned violently against one another in a brutal, bloody fight for the royal throne. A vicious civil war tore through the royal family itself, quietly weakening the very army that had once seemed entirely unbreakable to all. Distant governors, sensing this growing weakness at the very top, slowly began loosening their once unquestioned loyalty to the capital city. The empire that had once inspired only pure terror now inspired something far more dangerous still, quiet ambition among its many old enemies. In the fertile south, the city of Babylon had suffered under harsh Assyrian rule for many generations, and its people had never forgotten it. A determined Babylonian leader named Nabopolassar saw the empire visibly faltering and quickly seized the moment to finally break free forever. Far to the east, the Medes, once humble vassals themselves, gathered fierce mounted horsemen who were eager to finally settle very old scores. These former subjects, once bitter enemies of one another entirely, now found an unlikely common cause in their shared desire for survival. An unlikely alliance quietly formed between Babylon and Media, sealed not by any genuine friendship, but by a deep and long shared hatred. Together, these former rivals turned their combined eyes toward the one city that symbolized absolutely everything they despised, Nineveh. In 612 BC, the combined armies of Babylon and Media finally marched north together, straight toward the great and mighty Assyrian capital. For several long months, Nineveh's massive stone walls held firm exactly as intended, built centuries earlier to withstand this very siege. But heavy seasonal rains swelled the nearby rivers dramatically, and the flooding walls of the ancient city finally began to crumble apart. Attackers poured through the widening breach in the walls, and the once mighty city that had ruled the entire world descended into total chaos. Fires spread rapidly through the palaces and libraries alike, destroying centuries' worth of priceless art, ancient history, and human memory. Within just a few short days, the empire's beating heart lay completely in ruins, and its final desperate king vanished from history forever. Assyria did not simply lose one single battle. It lost its capital city, its entire army, and ultimately its whole will to survive at all. Within just a few short years, the vast empire that once ruled everything from Egypt all the way to Persia had completely ceased to exist forever. Nineveh's shattered ruins were left to the wind and drifting desert sand, so thoroughly buried that its exact location was soon forgotten. For over 2,000 years afterward, the greatest city on earth existed only as a distant legend, whispered rumor, and half-forgotten myth. Archaeologists finally rediscovered it deep in the 19th century, unearthing grand palaces frozen in place beneath layers of ash and dust. What they eventually found proved that Assyria's downfall was every bit as dramatic and total as its earlier meteoric rise to power once was. Empires that choose to rule through fear alone will eventually discover that fear alone cannot outlast rebellion forever, no matter how strong. Assyria built roads, libraries, and entire cities that quietly shaped civilization long after its once feared armies had disappeared completely. And yet, within a single human generation, all of that immense power turned completely to ash beneath one burning Mesopotamian evening sky. If this journey through the ancient world captivated you, subscribe now for more cinematic tours of history's greatest vanished ancient worlds. Tell us in the comments below which lost empire or ancient city you would like us to bring vividly back to life again the very next time around.